All right. Welcome to today's workshop. Thank you all for being here. My name is Abby Oakart. I am the Training and Education Manager for the Financial Empowerment Network. And we'd love for you, I see some folks introducing themselves in the chat. Please feel free to do that. Let us know who you are, where you're coming from, and so we know who's in the room today. Before we dive into the content, we're going to do a quick intro to Fen and some upcoming things we have, and then I'll turn it over to our speakers. So if you are here to learn about understanding collections and knowing your rights and options, you are in the right place. And this is the second workshop for our Credit and Debt Demystified Summer Series. And so we have one more left, which we'll throw in the chat here in a second. But we had over 100 people register for this workshop, which feels like pretty good. And also for July when people are out on vacation and all the things. So thank you all for being here. And I know we have a lot of interest in this topic. So a few housekeeping things. You can make sure you stay muted so we can hear the speakers clearly. This webinar workshop is being recorded. And so that's something that you will be able to view later on our YouTube page. We'll also send out the recording in our follow-up email that should go out by next week. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat. Becky and Julia will be answering questions as we go and also at the end. So feel free to put those in the chat as well. And I think, and if you need closed captions, those are in you can control that with your own Zoom menu, and you can go ahead and turn the closed captions on that way as well. And so a quick intro to who we are as the Financial Empowerment Network, if you aren't familiar with us, or FEN for short. So we are a network of folks who envision communities where low and moderate income individuals and families are able to achieve financial well-being and belonging. And we do this through being collaborators, connectors, and partner makers. So we are a liaison and bring resources to you. So we're here to support all of you through professional development opportunities like what we're doing today. We also host a monthly community of practice called the Financial Coaching Network. And that's to build up coaching skills, have money conversations, keep up to date on resources to support each other. You'll see some links in the chat to get connected to the coaching network if that's of interest to you. We'd love to have you there. We're skipping July for a summer break, but we will resume in August. And we also do many other things like working with asset building coalitions, Bank on Washington, and more. So you can check out our website for more information on that as well. And like I had said earlier, this is our second workshop in our Credit and Debt Demystified series. So we did our first one in June, Credit 101. That was done by Becky House. That was amazing. And we learned so much during that. And that is also on our YouTube page. You can catch the recording of that. And then please join us in August for our student loan repayment workshop. That is going to be full of good information and up-to-date information. So we're really excited about that as well. We're excited about a lot of things. We're also very excited about our Bank on Washington Forum, Pathways to Financial Belonging, which will be held in September in Tacoma at the University of Washington, Tacoma. It's going to be incredible. We've been having lots of planning meetings, people planning sessions, talking about everything from trauma of money to supporting Alice households to credit unions there's a workshop from credit union. So we got lots of things for everybody. So we'd love for you to sign up and get registered. Registered. I just see Ryan's. Yes, we're excited about a lot of things. That is what we need. We need on a t-shirt. All right. And our last big announcement that we're excited about is we are partnering with Devin Stubblefield, who is an amazing and experienced financial trainer, to offer 3 different trainings, which all help you as a financial coach, financial leader, financial speaker. We are offering a 4-day financial coaching for prosperity training for financial coaches to sharpen their skills. There's also what's called Magnetic Money Talks, which is just a half-day workshop that helps you sharpen your skills as a speaker and give engaging talks. And then we're doing a 3-day Engage and Inspire Financial Speaker Bootcamp. I have taken all of these trainings. I think a few of us in the room have, and they are amazing and valuable and you learn so much. And so we'd love for you to check those out. The registration for the financial coaching for prosperity closes tomorrow. So if that's something you're interested in, I would encourage you to get on that and get signed up. And there is a discount code for 25% off if you use FEN25 if you are interested in that. So those are our big announcements. We hope to see you at our workshops, Financial Coaching Network, Bank On, Forum, Elevate the Impact trainings. And if you need more information or have questions, feel free to put those in the chat or message me and I can get those answered for you. If you're interested in other past FEN workshops, you see here just a big list of ones that we've done. You can also scan that QR code and get right to our events page. And you can always go to our events page to see past events that we've done. And then today, so here we are to today where we're going to talk about understanding collections. Here's our agenda. You can put kind of a ish after all of these times, but we have our welcome here. Then we're going to do the main presentation. Then we have some time for questions. At the end, we'll close this out with one thing being to share your own resources or upcoming events that you have at the end. We'd love to hear that as well. And so that's what we can expect for today. And there's a lot more to FEN, but not enough time here to do it. So that's just our website if you want to check out more of what FEN is up to. And with all of that, I'm get to the part now where I get to introduce our speakers and my friends to you today. We're very lucky to have Becky House and Julia Kellison with us for this workshop. And so Becky House is the Director of Strategic Initiatives at American Financial Solutions, or AFS. In her role, she oversees the organization's strategic partnering, housing counseling programs, financial education initiatives, and grant processes. Becky serves on the board of FEN and as a co-chair for Bank on Washington. She has over 25 years of experience in program development in nonprofit organizations. She's certified as a financial educator through the National Foundation for Credit Counseling and is an OISTA Building Native Communities Certified Trainer. She's often quoted as an expert advisor for media outlets such as US News and World Report and ABC, NBC, CBS, and Money Magazine. So we're very lucky to have an expert with us today. And we also have Julia Kellison here. Julia is a consumer attorney in Northwest Justice Project's King County office. Her practice includes challenging debt collection abuses involving medical debt, garnishment, student loans, and auto financing sales. Julia was on the executive committee of the Washington State Bar Association's Antitrust, Consumer Protection, and Unfair Business Practices section. Julia received her JD in 1998 from Temple University School of Law and her BA in 1990 from Brown University. So without further ado, we are very lucky to have you both here with us. And so I will turn it over to you, stop sharing my screen so you can take over. So thanks for being here.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Abby, for having us today. I'm very excited. And I'm just jumping in here, but I do want to say that I'm also, not only am I excited to be here with all of you today, but I'm super excited. I'm always excited when I get to work side by side with Julia, because she is honestly incredible and one of the biggest champions that I've ever met for people who are low income and are struggling to manage debt collections, deal with debt collectors. So we are extremely lucky to have her with us today. And I know
right
she's
back at you, Becky. Right back at you. Seriously. And I learn myself from Becky every time we present. So glad to be here.
Right. Well, I am going to cue us up. Julie and I talked before we started today about questions. We're going to try to catch some questions as we go through. And Abby has graciously volunteered to kind of watch the chat for us. And so we can do that as time permits. We're going to try to catch questions as we go through, and then hopefully we'll have some time at the end for other questions as well. I will go ahead and share my screen just to get us started here. Let's hope I'm sharing the right screen today. I seem to be having some technical issues. Anyway, I don't know. Does that look right?
That looks right. You're great.
Okay,
Great.
Good. Perfect. Yeah, Julia, go ahead. If you want to.
No, I was just going to say I learned a lot from Becky and from all the questions from folks that are joining us today. So I run a debt clinic, kind of a walk-in, although it's remote every week. We'll talk about the research at the end, but it's really, really helpful to learn about what everyone else is seeing or abuses. And if we don't have time here, happy to be contacted at my email, which I can put in the chat. So that's all I wanted to say.
That's awesome. Thank you. All right, so we're going to just start out with a little bit of vocabulary because I know well, look, it's going all by itself, and that is probably part of what I messed up earlier. so, so we'll see what happens. I don't know. Anyway, so a little, like I said, a little bit of vocabulary on just collection terms so that when we're talking about it, not everybody uses the same words. So I just want to make sure that we're all kind of on the same page. So when we're saying creditor, I'm typically referring to like the original person that somebody owed money to. So it could be a hospital, it could be, internet provider, it could be a credit card company, whoever it is. If it's still in an in-house collections, that means it's still with the original creditor. So again, that hospital or, internet company, whoever that is. If it's charged off, it means that that original creditor has said, we don't think we're going to be able to collect the funds. So we are going to, cut our losses, write off the debt and move on. But they could be selling that debt or contracting with a third party collection agency, which takes us to that very last one. That's that third party who has now been contracted with or has purchased from that original creditor to collect that debt. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody. And I don't know, Julie, if you want to add anything there.
Oh, it sounds great.
Okay. All right. I'm going to hand it over to Julia.
So to start off a discussion about medical or credit reports, and we have some new news that might be old news as of yesterday, but our legislature passed a bill this session that prohibited medical debt from being reported on credit reports in Washington. It does not apply to medical debt credit cards like Care Credit. And it's going to be effective in Washington, July 27, 2025. It's a big, big deal. It recognizes that, health issues that come up and inability to pay medical debt, which so many, many people have, and particularly my clients of color. It's just a recognition that it shouldn't affect your ability to get other types of credit or impair your credit. Yesterday, I saw news of a federal judge, I believe in Massachusetts, really suspending what the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the federal consumer agency, was trying to put through before the change in administration. They were also trying to impose a rule about no medical debt on credit reports for everyone. So we hope our state rule will stay in place and not get preempted by federal law. We'll just see what happens in that sphere. But if it could be, we hope it stays in place. It will be in place for our state, July 27, 2025, unless there's some other type of action. It was a big deal. And another thing to launch us into, if we go to the next slide, or Becky, unless you want to add anything. So another big bump up in coverage for low-income folks and less low-income folks for services provided at Washington hospitals. And you can see a list of Washington hospitals on the Washington Department of Health website. And by the way, all of this information, particularly on charity care, are in publications on WashingtonLawHelp.org. I hope everyone's using it. We help support the site, but it's not just NJP publications. It's lots of publications from lots of places with self-help forms, know your rights information, and it gets updated. So there's a really terrific publication on Washington Law Help for charity care and your rights vis-a-vis charity care and medical debt. And charity care, for those that don't know, is financial assistance for qualifying folks receiving services in a hospital, but it covers outpatient services, clinics run by hospitals, so inpatient or outpatient care. It can be premiums, it can be co-pays, whether you're uninsured or underinsured, and it applies to all Washington residents regardless of citizenship status. It's a big, powerful law. No one ever knows about it. We see folks coming to our clinic every week getting sued for medical debt they don't owe because they were not properly screened by the hospital. And then they get sued and their credit gets ruined. So again, that medical debt on credit report piece that goes into effect later this month should help prevent that. But in July 1 of 2022, the legislature, at the request of the Attorney General, greatly expanded charity care. Now about 4 million people in our state are eligible for full financial assistance, depending on income, or a discount. And it's divided up the way it works. Again, all this information is in a Law Help publication, but the hospitals are divided into tier 1 and tier 2, depending on their size. But really what I tell folks is if you get a medical debt, if you get a medical bill, no matter who's sending it, call up and ask if there's financial assistance or charity care. The words don't have to be magical. Some hospitals call it financial assistance. Some medical providers call it medical assistance. But that's what it is. It's enormously powerful. If someone comes in with debts from lots of different places, I say, let's apply for charity care. We can suspend a lawsuit for debt collection to allow them to apply for charity care. If they are eligible for me or any of my colleagues across the state, that lawsuit or the hospital debt part of that lawsuit is going to go away. And then we're going to waive that charity care award letter. We're going to show that to the other providers who aren't subject to the charity care laws, but say, hey, will you agree to follow this charity care debt determination by the hospital that my client is eligible for a waiver of the bill? Will you agree to waive your bill as well? Try to get the whole thing tossed. And I'm also going to let them know that my client's collection proof, if that's the case. Again, there's a really terrific publication, which I'll mention, about garnishment. And we've just revamped the Washington Law Help website. So if you go to www.washingtonlawhelp.org, which is in our resource page, and just type in charity care or medical debt or garnishment collections, you'll get to we tried to make it simpler to find the publications. So that was a lot. I'll turn it back to Becky.
Julia,
Yeah.
we do have one question about the medical debt. Someone asked, is that just for medical debt going forward, or does it apply to past medical debt on credit reports as well?
I believe that's a really good question. Does it apply to medical debt incurred after July 1 is what I'm hearing. Is that how you're reading the question?
I think
Or if the medical debt
like
was
say I have
incurred,
medical debt right now and then the law goes into effect. I think this is the previous slide about how it can't show up on your credit report. So
I think it applies to all. Becky, is that please jump in here.
Yeah. If it's a medical debt, it doesn't matter, when it was incurred.
Okay.
As far as the credit report goes, it would not be able to be listed on the credit report for Washington State, at least. As far as the debt, though, I think one of the things Julia said that's really important for people, I hope that everybody heard this, is that the debts, yes, the guidelines changed 7/1/22, but even before that, we did have charity care in place. So people, if they have debts that they're bringing forward, those are opportunities to do exactly what Julia is saying. Go back to the hospital and say, I need to apply for financial assistance.
That's a great point, Becky. It existed before it expanded July 1 of 2022. But even under the old guidelines, you're still eligible. So just apply. And follow the instructions in the publication, which really kind of walk you through it. Thanks,
Great.
Becky.
And oh, there we go. Someone was asking what FPL stands for. So that means federal poverty level.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. We ready? We good? Okay. So in terms of collection of a collection accounts, excuse me, on credit reports. So collection accounts can stay on a credit report. Technically, the answer is 7.5 years from the time that the account goes past due with the original creditor. So and it is really important to understand that date. And so when you're working with people too, to help them understand, when that clock starts ticking. So it's not when the account, I guess it is technically when the clock starts ticking when the first day after the person makes or doesn't make the first payment that they missed. Man, that's hard to say. It's backward. It feels backwards, but somebody misses a payment and that's when the clock starts ticking. If they never make another payment again, that clock is going to tick for technically 7.5 years. Usually there's a period of time where it's not on the credit report, but it doesn't matter. The clock is still ticking during that time. In terms of how long that item can be placed on a credit report. And the other piece of that is that there isn't a way that you can extend that length of time. So if you make a payment on on the debt, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to stay on the credit report even longer. It doesn't restart that 7.5 year clock. And even just acknowledging the debt doesn't necessarily mean that clock is going to restart. However, doing both of those things could restart a different clock that can actually be a much worse than, which seems hard to believe, but much worse than what is on a credit report. And I'm going to give that to Julia to talk about.
So in our state, there are 3 types of statute of limitations. Most of the debts Becky and I are talking about today are the 6-year statute of limitations on written contracts. That can depend. It definitely matters and promissory notes. It can depend. Definitely folks should call us, American Financial Solutions or Northwest Justice Project or one of our partners. But I know when I'm doing an intake, I want to know not just the debt the person's coming to me with, but what's your global amount of debt and what's the global amount of, how much of that debt is where in that 6-year period. Are we really close to the 6-year mark from date of last payment or date of default, whichever is later? If so, I'm going to remind the person, do not make a partial payment. If you make a partial payment within that 6-year period, you can extend it. You're going to re-age that debt another 6 years from that partial payment. And boy, that creditor would really want you to make that partial payment. So if they haven't been sued, it's just really important to know where they are in that. And I do get a lot of folks feeling terribly about carrying debt and stressed. And I feel like it's my job to reduce the stress and let them know what their options are. And one of which is, hang on, you're almost there. Let's wait and see. If I'm considering lots of things like, some sort of workout agreement or bankruptcy, or if they're collection proof. So it's good to know with any particular debt where you are in this statute of limitations. So, and when it's just too late to sue on the debt. And if a creditor sues on a debt beyond the statute of limitations, the debtor has claims, financial claims, potentially against the debt collector, a debt collection agency, for violating the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, which we'll talk a little bit about. So I don't know, and Becky, you probably see the acknowledging. I haven't seen a debt collector say, you told me you were going to pay and then didn't, and therefore the statute of limitations has been extended, but maybe you have. So really what I'm reporting about is anecdata a lot of times, but I just haven't seen acknowledging, you know, it's so he said, she said. I'm really just looking for that, where that last payment was, or if the person knows, but maybe you know differently on that than me.
Yeah, for the most part, that is what we see. And we don't, the payment is the trigger. The person makes a payment. And
Okay.
what we will also see with that is that somebody, like a collection agency will send the person, um, uh, something to agree with. Like, I agree that I'm going to make, X number of payments for X number of times. So they've signed a new commitment with that collection agency. And maybe they, again, if you know me, I always say I'm not going to tell people not to pay their debts, but again, you have to be strategic about it, right? We don't want people throwing, good money after bad. So the question is, if in one scope, you can look at it and say, okay, well, they agree that they would pay the money and they're going to make these payments for 6 months and then, hopefully be done. But can they really make those payments for that 6 months? Because now they're re-signing a brand new agreement with this creditor. And if they break that agreement, I mean, they're in a world of hurt. So we don't want them to, get stuck into those types of agreements, and that's what we'll see. So it's essentially a new agreement to pay the same debt, and it's in writing now, so the creditor has something.
And the agreement itself acts as a trigger for the re-aging. That's what you're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
We have a couple questions. One is the statute of limitations jurisdiction based on the debtor location or the consumer location?
That's where the contract may be the guiding principle here, but I would argue, as I have with student loan cases, private student loan debt, I'm going to argue Washington law all
Okay.
the time. But I think you could talk to legal aid, talk to Becky's American Financial Solutions, but depending on the type of debt and the industry, I'm going to force the issue of Washington statute of limitations, but the contract may say something different, and we'd have to figure that out.
Okay.
Okay.
And then the next question, if you go all the way through the collections process and the account becomes a charge off, then you pay that debt off soon after. Does that paid in full charge off still stay on your credit report for 7 years?
It does. It would still be on the credit report until the timeline was exhausted. Yeah. However, I will say that it looks better for something to show as paid versus unpaid. But you have to look at as Julia said, you have to look at the whole picture. It's not this one debt. You've got a collection agency that's, calling and harassing someone and, pushing them to make these payments, making it feel super, super, super urgent. And the reality is, that really may not be the most urgent thing this person needs to be focusing on. Or not that it's our decision, but I mean, as you're talking to the person, you're learning about their situation and, what are the other things that they have to pay, and where are they, as Julie was saying, in the timeline too.
All right, thank you. That's all for now.
Okay. All right. We are moving on here. Whoops, sorry, didn't go. This is, essentially this is what we're looking at. If somebody does, this is why we don't want someone to get sued by a creditor, because if they lose or they don't respond, all kinds of bad things can happen. Julia?
Yes. If we can prevent the lawsuit, that's great. I usually sing the lawsuit. That's generally what our clinic helps with, and happy to fight it any way we can. But basically, a creditor has to serve the the plaintiff in a lawsuit has to serve the defendant or debtor, alleged debtor, personally, or a co-resident. And again, all of this information is in on Washington Law Help as well under debt collection. So, and then once that person is served in Washington, they are a co-resident of suitable age and discretion. The defendant has 20 days to respond to that lawsuit. They can do so by filing a notice of appearance, which just says it's not an answer. It's not raising defenses to the lawsuit. It's just saying, I'm here. Please send me, here's the address to communicate with me, court and plaintiff. Here's my official address. Send me everything you got. Also within that 20 days, if I would suggest calling the clear line as soon as possible if you're outside of King County, or the numbers on our resource page if you're in King County. We'd love to help before that 20 days is up. I tell folks all the time, you've got to open your mail. You've got to, if you're served with the lawsuit, act quickly. The more time we have to strategize and figure out what the options are, the better for our client, the debtor, the alleged debtor. So an answer is what you file if you want to raise defenses. I wasn't served properly. I don't know the debt. I wasn't offered charity care, and this is medical debt from a hospital. We have a really terrific checklist on our do-it-yourself answer on Washington Law Help that kind of lists all the available defenses. This is beyond the statute of limitations. I paid it. Any number of defenses that folks have, if true, of course, can and should be raised, and that answer or notice of appearance or both needs to be filed in the court and served on the lawyer for the debt collection agency by the 20th day. And it's 20 calendar days, not business days. So if you don't respond, which is all too common in consumer debt collection, unfortunately, people don't know they have rights, or they don't read English, or any number of challenges and barriers, have disabilities where folks can't get the help they need to answer. That debt collector and the attorney are going to go ahead and get a judgment by default, which means no one has responded. Or the lawsuit might proceed and the debtor's unable to convince the court that they don't owe the debt, and a judgment is entered. And then the judgment creditor is what we call them, the person that wins the lawsuit, now can try to garnish wages or a bank account, or in rare cases, personal property. It's an automatic lien on real property. But wage and bank account garnishment is what we typically see. We have another new exciting law. July 1, we now have an automatic cash exemption in a bank account in the collection of consumer debt. So, and that's stackable on top of some benefits like SSI and Social Security, which are already automatically protected in a bank account. Now everyone gets $2,000 of cash automatically protected in a bank account if a judgment creditor tries to garnish somebody's bank account. And that's in all bank accounts. You don't get it with each separate bank account. That's a big deal. We don't think people should be wiped out, not able to pay rent or eat or keep lights or heat on because they owe an old credit card debt. Also, our garnishment, a certain amount of wages are protected from garnishment. And basically, the greater of 80% of your net disposable wages, or 35 times the state minimum wage, the greater of those two numbers is protected from garnishment of your wages, which is also indexed. That goes up every January. We update our publications. All these numbers are on Washington Law Help. as well as all the other types of income that are protected. So I could talk all day about garnishment. I love garnishment, and we, pretty much within the last 7 or 8 years, in our consumer coalition have really talked to lawmakers in Olympia to say, just people's eyes used to glaze over about what's garnishment. It's just super, super important to low income people to be able to protect their wages in collections. So we've over the years have gotten a steady increase in the amount that's protected again, so people aren't completely destabilized or rendered homeless because they're getting hit with a collection on a consumer debt.
And Julia, someone asked what we have the state protections, but do the state protections apply to wage garnishment from federal government, like federal student loans?
That's I think I'm Becky, I don't know that I know this offhand. I haven't had a student loan garnishment case. I think for private student loans, we have a special provision in state law for the collection on judgments from private student loans. Again, that's in the publication. So federal student loans may be subject to the federal garnishment amount.
I'm
But
fairly sure they are
okay. Good.
For federal student loans. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But again, those, only up to, I believe, 15% of Social Security can be garnished. A really terrific website that I steer people to with kind of the A to Z of student loans is www.studentloanborrowerassistance.org. It's a website supported by the National Consumer Law Center, and it's got sort of the latest and greatest on a really changing, fluid area, as we all know. But listed on there, thank you so much, studentloanborrowerassistance.org. Whether you're in default or in debt or thinking about loans, it's a great way to know what's out there and what's going on, including what type of collection actions can be taken.
Perfect. All right. It's a lot, and it is
a lot.
Any time that you have someone who's received a summons, if they're coming to you first, legal assistance is really the best way forward in that kind of situation. So I want to just echo what Julia said in contacting Northwest Justice, and looking for whatever kind of assistance may be available for your clients at that time. Even getting to WashingtonLawHelp.org can be really beneficial. There's a lot of great publications on there, including the publication I learned a lot from reading this publication about the types of incomes that cannot be garnished. So again, it's a website full of amazing information. Anyway, so we kind of hit on this a little bit when we're talking about collections and repaying collections. So, there's a kind of a guideline, I think, that both Julie and I both look at and our organizations look at when we're talking to someone who's coming in with collections. And the first thing is to really understand where that person is with all of their debts. So making a list of all of their outstanding debts and trying to figure out when did the person go behind on these debts. And that is that date of delinquency. So, has it been 2 years since they haven't made a payment or since they've gone behind, or has it been 6 years, like Julie was mentioning? So they're running up into that statute of limitations potentially. So it's very, again, important to get that. And then prioritizing all of those debts, looking at not just what's on the credit report, but also, what's going on in their, regular day-to-day life. What expenses do they have to cover? What debts, are not showing up on the credit report, but they do have debts, and maybe they're, super important expenses that they have to pay. If they are on a credit report, making looking at when are the dates, when are these things going to be coming off that credit report. So again, that's kind of figuring out, working yourself backwards, like, okay, it's supposed to come off, December of 2029. We typically give higher priority to debts that are still with the original creditor, as opposed to things that have already hit with collections. Although again, it can depend on maybe what that collection is for. And then we looking at, can the person, is saving up to repay this debt? That's the higher priority, because again, we're going through and we're prioritizing all of the expenses that we have in that household. Saving up to potentially offer a settlement to that creditor. And we can talk a little bit more about that in a minute too. If that's the most realistic option, that is not going to show that an account is paid in full, but it can be enough to satisfy a collection agency and, move them away from you so you don't have to worry about it. The next step in that is, as you see on here, this number 4, contacting the creditor, negotiating with them, focusing on the end amount. And this is where what I was mentioning earlier with the making payments is the tricky part. So it's easier for people to make payments because it's not a big chunk amount. But what I try to encourage people to do is, set money aside in the form of payment that they're going to be, giving to the creditor. So instead of sending the creditor $50 every month, you're putting $50 every month into a savings account or something to, earmark that money for that creditor. So when we have enough money built up in there, we can go back to the collection agency or the creditor and offer that settlement. So it's done. The bill is done. Hopefully that makes sense. This, we said, I typically say start, if you're going to offer a settlement, you start at 25% of whatever is owed and work from there. There are ramifications to not paying the full amount, but they can be better than having someone getting sued and losing that lawsuit and having garnishments. So, set the max amount. So let's say I owe somebody $1,000. So I'm going to say, okay, my goal is to save up $500. And then I'm going to go ahead and contact that collection agency and offer them this settlement amount. And I'm not necessarily going to start with $500. I'm going to start with $250, but I'm going to work my way up. Hopefully that part makes sense too. Just don't start at the top. That's my thing. Because if they think that you have $500, they're going to think you have more money than that. And they're going to push you to pay even more. And they'll say things like, hey, why don't you borrow money from your parents? Why don't you borrow money from your siblings? Why don't you borrow money from your friends? Whatever. Why don't we just set up payment arrangements? And again, that's not a relationship. This is the way that I always look at it. It's not a relationship that we want to be in, right? They're not our friends. They're there to take our money, and that's that. And then, finally looking for, getting receipts from that either again, collection agency or a creditor to show that the amount it's paid, and following up with them that it is been marked correctly on the credit report. You're following up, really looking at the credit report to make sure that it's marked as, settled for less than full balance, or settled, paid or something to that effect. I can't think of the right words right now. And again, always thinking about part of that at the top of this list is the prioritizing. What's important to pay, and what would, be nice to pay, and what is, that's probably not going to make it. And it's not a matter of shirking responsibility. I mean, I think we all understand that debts are debts, and yes, technically we're supposed to pay them, but sometimes these debts are made up of a lot of fees and a lot of interest too. That wasn't part of the original debt. So, and the idea is to help people move forward, not to keep them entrenched in the situation. So, that brings us to number 7, our bankruptcy considerations. So, Julie, I don't know if you have more you want to.
There's a quick
Sure.
question, Julia, before you go to a new topic. Someone asked, is there any way to have them removed from the bureaus at the time of negotiation?
You can ask. you know, it's a very fine line. So you can ask as part of the negotiation, but technically, if they told you that they were going to, you know, they would have that item removed from the credit report, they would be in violation of the Fair Credit Reporting Act, which I'm not going to say none of them are, but they would be by saying that out loud to you and agreeing to that with you. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Um, and the other side of that is that people can also you know, submit a dispute, and after an account is settled or even after an account is paid in full, to try to, you know, see if there's some wiggle room to get that account removed from their credit report. But we will talk about that because that can actually cause more harm to the credit report than simply paying off the debt. So yeah, that's a huge question, honestly. I don't know. Sorry, Julia. Go ahead.
No, that's great. So when I'm talking to folks, if they have a lot of debt, and a lot of my clients have a lot of debt, it can stem from anything from a lost job, from medical bills. So bankruptcy is another financial planning or another option that could be available to folks. And a couple general rules of thumb that I'm asking, are you done accruing debt? And do you have something that can be taken? If someone's collection proof, and I think they can withstand the heat of debt collection, which some people definitely cannot. Meaning if someone's collection proof and their only income is Social Security, nothing can be taken if they have no assets and their only income is Social Security and they don't own a home. You know, a judgment creditor can get a judgment, but they're not going to be able to take their money. And if they do take their money, they're in violation of federal law. So, but judgments last 10 years, they're renewable for another 10. So 20 years of debt collection or having to write each new debt collector and say, I'm on Social Security. Again, we have these forms on Washington Law Help in the Dealing with Debt Collectors publication, but that's a lot. And some people, you know, or they might get calls. It's a long time to be under the stress of debt collection. But in general, you know, bankruptcy is a really great option if somebody's wages are getting garnished. They're not going to be able to make rent. You know, it's going to cause a cascade of other issues. And judgments accrue interest. Consumer judgments in general accrue interest at 9%. There is a certain amount of home equity protected from it's exempt from debt collection. Again, that's in the publications and is sort of a huge topic on its own. But bankruptcy is a very, you know, it's thought of as a, you know, no one looks forward to bankruptcy, but it's a really great way to relieve someone of the incredible toxic burden and stress related to debt and a real fresh start. That's why it's there. People of all income stripes have used it. You know, certainly, you know, that my clients, you know, can use it. And so we are often referring people, if we have a very small in-house resource for bankruptcy, we're trying to make that bigger. If you can't get a pro bono bankruptcy, a free bankruptcy, which is really tough to do, it might cost anywhere from $1,300 to $1,500, maybe higher, $1,800. Which is a lot of money for someone that doesn't have any money. You know, it's a real problem. We're trying to get more pro bono bankruptcy attorneys to help with the really great need there is for people to get help from an attorney, which is, I recommend, I think only, it can be complicated. I think it's just, and I'm not saying this because I am an attorney, but I think it's really, really a great idea to have an attorney. I've only known a few people to do it completely themselves on their own, and it's hard to do. So And happy to be contacted about bankruptcy resources for folks. So, and there's a chapter 7, which is the no asset bankruptcy, and then a chapter 13 for higher wage earners. We have information on our website on that as well, or sorry, Washington Law Help, but it's for sure a great idea, we think, when and every case is different, but if someone's got more than $10,000 of debt, typically, again, every case is different, but yes, we could apply for charity care and get rid of this $10,000 worth of debt, but if someone's got 40,000 of other debt knocking at the door, let's just, let's connect them with the bankruptcy and get a clean slate, start fresh. You can only do it once every 8 years for a 7, different rules for a 13, but it should be part of the toolkit of financial planning and stress reduction, in my humble opinion. And many people's humble opinion. It's just another option. That's what I've got.
All right. Thank you for that.
And Becky, do you want to talk about, sorry, the effect, or do you talk about later the effect on credit?
For bankruptcy?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can talk about it right now. That's fine. So here's the thing with bankruptcy, right? It immediately it puts you into a different category when it comes to credit. So you are going to be certainly it has a negative impact on a credit score. Bankruptcy shows up on a credit report for Chapter 7. It's on there for 10 years from the time that it's filed. For a Chapter 13, it's on there for 7 years from the time that it's filed. I mean, it is what it is. So it does reduce the score, but at the same time, there are things that people can be doing to start adding positive information back into their credit report. The worst thing somebody can do after filing bankruptcy, I know this sounds counterintuitive, but the worst thing they can do is avoid credit at all costs, because that will really sink their credit. And we know that credit is needed for so many different pieces of our lives, renting, car insurance, all of those things. So it's important if someone files bankruptcy that they have a plan for how they're going to, start adding positive information in there and start building back up. I've seen people 2 years out of bankruptcy be able to get into home ownership because they worked their way through it, adding positive information to the credit, saving money, and the bankruptcy, it limits the number of creditors that, will provide a loan, and it will limit the types of loans that someone can get, but it's not a deal breaker. There are lots of creditors out there who will work with people who have a bankruptcy on their credit report. So I think I say this all the time, bankruptcy has a bad name, but it's a very necessary tool for many, many people. Can be super, super helpful and be the restart that they need, rather than trying to nickel and dime, their way out of, as Julia said, $40,000 worth of debt, that's already past due and not going anywhere.
And one other thing I get, Becky, too, the people think bankruptcy is a lot worse than having a lot of negative accounts when their stuff has gone to collections, and that's just not true. You can clear the decks faster. You'll, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you get moved into this sort of other category for a while, but it's really going to improve your credit faster than having a whole bunch of negative credit accounts, debt collection accounts. So
it's true.
I always have to dispel that, it's way worse doing bankruptcy.
The idea behind it, and the idea behind it in the scoring, is that when you file bankruptcy, it's you are shifted into a different bucket of people, really, which sounds terrible, but that's how they look at us. So you do get shifted into a different bucket of people, and it's the fact that you did something about these debts, rather than just having a whole line of, unpaid old debts or whatever, collection accounts, things like that. There was an action that was taken to resolve those debts. So there's a resolution. I guess that's the best way to say it, which does have a different impact with not only on the credit report, but also over time as you come back from that. It's easier to come back from a bankruptcy than it is to come back from having, 5 or 6 different collection accounts on a credit report. Quicker, not, I shouldn't say easier, but yeah. With anything, if it's negative, the only way to come back is to add positive. That's it. So there's my horse for today. Anyway, okay. There's just a few other things to think about in terms of avoid paying. If they're saying, hey, they can't verify the debt. You've asked them to verify the debt and they can't do it, right? That's a we're not going to pay this debt. They're demanding payment by Western Union. Very often that is a scam. It's not real. I can't think of a time when I've heard of someone paying by Western Union that it was not some kind of a scam. Unfortunately. If they're demanding a check by phone, especially if they called the person and they're asking for that check by phone, that's a big red flag as well. If you don't owe the debt, for sure, your client knows for sure that they don't owe the debt, avoid paying that. And if you're not sure, if you or your client's not sure that they owe the debt, that's another red flag in terms of paying the debt. So looking, again, I should just put plastered on my forehead, WashingtonLawHelp.org today. There's a ton of different kind of form letters that people can fill out there, including finding out, how do I know for sure that I owe this debt. So that's a great place to start, if you're dealing with collections. Anything, Julia? Okay. I do want to say, when we talk about credit repair, and this kind of goes back to the question about, I'm not saying the question was about credit repair, but that's what it reminds me of, the question about having the things removed from the credit report. So one of the things that we see a lot is businesses out there that do credit repair, right? So they're helping people to fix their credit. And there really is nothing that a credit repair organization can do for a person that the person cannot do for themselves. And the reality of it is that they can actually cause more damage than harm for the person. So I'm just going to run down these real quickly. It's costly and it's risky. There is an act that governs credit repair organizations. So many people don't know that either, but it's a federal law that if you're looking for credit repair help or something like that, a credit repair organization cannot collect a fee until they have delivered on the services that they promise to provide. There is not a way that there's no magic fix, right? They can't remove accurate negative information from a credit report, no matter what they say can be done. And there are better options. Even, talking, now I'll plug ourselves, talking to American Financial Solutions, a counselor there, or, doing a dispute if the information is actually not correct, in the information in your credit report. Those are things that people can do for themselves. It costs, paper and a stamp, and sometimes not even that if you dispute it online. So there are definitely options for, do-it-yourself credit repair, I guess I'll say, and disputing with collection agencies. And this is I just kind of want to go through a few of some of the things that can happen when you're doing credit report disputes, right? Or essentially, again, credit repair. So one, the damage to the score. So if it's a legitimate debt, and it stays on the credit report, disputing it's not going to remove it because that's part of the history. And not only will it not remove it, it can update the date of the last activity on the credit report, which is not going to keep it on the credit report any longer, but it looks like there is more fresh touches to the data, essentially. So it could actually cause a score to dip. And I really want to be clear, I'm not telling people not to dispute inaccurate, invalid information on a credit report. You absolutely should. What I am saying is that you don't want to submit disputes that are false disputes. That's what I'm saying, because it can backfire. Um, the reduced leniency. So if something does happen, you make that dispute and it's found to be an invalid dispute, and you end up having to pay, or the client has to pay that creditor, the creditor or collection agency may be less lenient in how they're going to deal with that person because they've already gone through this dispute process with them, which they're going to be considering a frivolous dispute. If collections are not going on, that is literally like waving a red flag. I know I get really like intense when I talk about this subject because it is really, I have seen what happens. That's why I've seen it, the flip side of people disputing information that was not wrong. Um, I love when Julia was sharing with us that there's $2,000 in an account that cannot be touched, because that would have saved one of the women that I met in a YWCA class once, who her wages were not her wages weren't garnished, her bank account was garnished, which was her rent money, and she couldn't pay her rent. And just like Julia said, it created a snowball effect that ultimately ended up with her being evicted from her apartment with her children. And yeah, Ryan, it was really sad. But that's what I'm saying. It gets done, and people don't think about what is on the back end, what's happening on the back end when these disputes are filed. Anyway, collections can resume, which could lead to lawsuits, which could lead to wage garnishment. I know that's the least, whatever. Um, the increased stress of having to deal with those kind of situations, and even potentially having additional legal expenses if they do get sued over the debt. So there's a lot there, and I'm trying to spit it out quickly. I know, but it's again just being mindful of that. And the final thing I'm going to say on this is that when we look at disputing information, sometimes it will temporarily come off of a credit report, but that doesn't mean that it can't go back onto a credit report. So as you see on your screen here, it doesn't mean it's permanent. If the person, so let's say that the creditor doesn't respond in that 30-day window, but they're supposed to, but they do respond after 35 days, that's going to come back onto the credit report. Even though that's not within the normal rules, it still is going to show back up on the credit report. Yeah, that's the second big point down there. Ongoing reporting. So if a creditor continues to report, so it comes off because they missed the deadline, but then the next month they do their normal reporting, or they do the next quarter, they do their next reporting, it's back on the credit report. It's going to show back up on the credit report. The one thing to know about that though is if something does get removed from your credit report, and even legitimately, you make a dispute, it legitimately is removed from the credit report. If for whatever reason that creditor gets it put back onto the credit report, the credit bureaus themselves have to notify you that that information is going back on the credit report. So you will get a notification that that is happening. So I hope that makes sense. I saw the comment, yeah, about credit repair. Yeah, people definitely think credit repair is harder than it is. And the reality is, and I say this all the time, disputing things that are yours, that are, that are inaccurate. That's one, one offshoot of credit repair. Another offshoot of credit repair is thinking about how do I add positive information back into my credit report instead of people focus heavily on the negative information in the credit report. That is past, it is old. I'm not saying don't pay it, but the drill. It's focusing on how do I get good stuff in there and how do I keep that good stuff repeating. So those are the two big things I have to say about that. Anyway, I don't know, Julia.
No, I'm good. That's great.
Okay, I think I'm wondering if for the sake of time we should move to the Fair Debt Collections Practices Act.
Sure. Can I say one thing about debt
Yeah.
management, debt settlement?
Yeah, let me flip over.
And I have a grim view of it, not because I see the back end of disreputable places doing debt settlement and credit, like taking my client's money when they're collection proof and saying we can do something. I see the back end of disreputable places doing this. And I just tread with care, danger, danger, danger. But some of the debt settlement places, that again, the disreputable ones will take the money, promise lots of things, have clients sign a power of attorney sometimes, and still leave them hang out to dry, and they're still getting sued for these debts that they thought were getting taken care of. And they've given money that they didn't need to this place that didn't settle their debts. I just see them, so I just warning signals for disreputable companies doing this, including credit repair and freaking people out unnecessarily about the importance of credit. So they're going to pay a lot of money to maybe not have done what the big promises are. So anyway,
No, that's fair.
but there are good debt management and places like American Financial Solutions, but that is not what I'm talking about.
Thank you.
Most of them are really unnecessary and leave my clients worse off.
I think it's hard. It is a very fine line, and we deal with that a lot. And I will say debt management is what, like American Financial Solutions, just so you know, that's about 30% of the people we see. So most of the people who do not do debt management, we don't do debt settlement, but I always put them here side by side because there's a lot of confusion about what is debt management, what is debt consolidation, what is debt settlement. The difference in debt management and debt management, you're paying your debt, all of it back. In debt settlement, you're paying back part of what you owe. In debt settlement, you should already be behind if you're going to use a debt settlement company, which I would not recommend doing. But if anybody ever says to you, well, you should just stop paying your bills, that's a red flag. No one should ever tell you to just quit paying your bills, right? Unless there's a backup plan and it's not like quit paying your bills and pay me instead. That is the red flag. There's your red flag.
Totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, if Julia tells you to stop paying your bills, she's not going to do it for the wrong reasons, right? If I say if I say stop paying your bills, I'm not going to do it either because I don't want you to be in danger, right? But if a debt settlement company tells you that, there's a problem. And they will tell people who are current on their bills, you don't need to pay all of this. That's all interest. You don't owe them that money, so stop paying your bills. That's no good.
And back to the prioritization that Becky covered earlier, and prioritizing debts to pay the most priority to keep the lights and the heat and the rent,
Yes.
paid. So
yeah, exactly. This is going to do another thing. I just wanted debt management's not debt consolidation because it does consolidate payments, but it doesn't consolidate debt. The debts are still themselves. The money still goes to the original creditor. It goes through the credit counseling agency, but it goes to the original creditor. And the debts are paid in full. Okay. Real quickly, debt consolidation, just different. It's, consolidating debts. Usually if you're going to do a debt consolidation, you got to have, decent credit in order to do that. The debt is still going to be owed. It's just moved somewhere else. It can extend the payment. It can extend or increase how much the person's going to have to pay back. There's a lot of things with debt consolidation, but I just wanted to put that in here so we had it too. And if you have questions, you can certainly reach out after today too. Bankruptcy, here's what Julia was talking about, to the chapter 7 and the chapter 13. I don't know if anybody has any further questions on bankruptcy. I think we covered it pretty well.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So here's the Fair Debt Collections Practices Act. And I don't know. Yeah, here we go. We're on 18. Julie, you want to take this or?
Sure. All right. 1 minute, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So basically, I believe it was in the 70s that Congress passed the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. And it really, it's, the act exists whether you owe the debt or not. It's because there were so many abuses in the debt collection industry that they set guidelines for what's fair debt collection and how people should be treated and what they can expect. And you don't have to be harassed and told, you know, it set in place rules, again, regardless of whether you owe the debt, it's how the debt's collected matters. So we have this federal law. It covers third-party collection agencies, not the original creditor. So as the slide says, it's really a consumer rights statute and governs how debt collectors communicate with you and what they can and can't do. And it's fairly extensive. We don't need to spend a lot of time on it. But we also have a state debt collection law that's really powerful called the Washington Collection Agency Act. Again, this information is in Washington Law Help, but it kind of mirrors a lot of what we call the FDCPA, the federal law. But it also has specific rules for debt buyers, which are a type of debt collector that buys debt on the secondary market for pennies on the dollar and sues like crazy. We see lots and lots of debt buyer lawsuits. They are subject to heightened proof requirements because for years they were filing lawsuits with, a computer code line of proof. And every plaintiff in any civil lawsuit, you got to have proof that you own the debt and that you're suing the right person for the debt. And that was not the case with debt buyers. So lots of good rights in the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, including the notifications, what's got to be in the letters that they send. It's got to include the amount of the debt, the name of the original creditor, this 30-day dispute language, and the right, as Becky went into before, about asking for verification of the debt. If you don't know where it's from, you don't think it's your debt, you don't think it's the right amount, you have this right to ask for verification. And again, the publication in Washington Law Help has sample letters on dispute and verification.
Can I just say, oh, I'm sorry.
Absolutely.
I don't know if I
No, jump in.
I'm just
please.
Jumping all over in the screens too. I was trying to get to the act. Anyway, the Washington State's collection agency. Anyway, I was just going to say that just because it says, you have 30 days to dispute the debt, that only really applies to the fact that before it's going to hit like your credit report or something like that. Otherwise, I mean, you could dispute it at any time.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm clicking. Are we clicking?
Let's click.
Okay.
You can ask, again, back to the stress that debt collection puts on people, the calls, their strict timelines within which they can't call at all times of the night or day. I believe it's not before 8 a.m. and not after 9 p.m. The state law may be 8 a.m. and 9 p.m. Okay. So, but that they can't use harassing, abusive language. They can't threaten to do something that they can't legally do. We're going to throw you in jail. We're going to, take your food, where you're a bad parent. If you're not paying your bills, your kids are going to get taken away. I mean, people should really be, it's important to be civil back to even a rude debt collector, as hard as that can be. But these cases can, the way people are treated by debt collectors can, they're private attorneys that take these cases and legal aid attorneys. If people are put through, really terrible harassment, it doesn't have to be truly terrible, but it's important to take notes when you're dealing with a debt collector, particularly someone that's being harassing or threatening. They can't make false or misleading statements. All right, I think that covers it, but it's really about fairness and dealing with people with respect in the collection of, collection of a debt on the state and federal level.
I would say too, in this, when you talk about the false and misleading statements or threatening, criminal action, those are often, we don't necessarily, we did used to see a lot of that in collection agencies. And again, I've been doing in this for a long time, but the normally now when you see that, that's a huge red flag that it's a scam, that if they're threatening to take someone to jail or do whatever, contact their employer, then you're like, okay, this is not even a real debt. So that's one thing that can be helpful, and often the targets of this are older people who are like freaking out because so and so said they were going to go to jail because they didn't pay their taxes. And we're like, well, yeah, I mean, yes, that's is possible, but usually the IRS is not calling you up to to tell you that they're taking you to jail. So it's a scam.
Yeah. And you have a right to stop the communication using a cease and desist letter. Again, it's in a publication on Law Help, but if you say, please stop, you can do it. Send me verification of the debt or please stop communicating with me. And that means that unless they sue you, they have to stop communicating with you, and they have to stop with the calls. So another important right.
Okay. So if you have problems or violations of the Fair Debt Collections Practices Act, you can reach out. I mean, we have a few things here. The Federal Trade Commission, that's again federal level. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, they're still there. I know people go, I know, I do it too, but they are still there. The
For
Washington Attorney.
now, they're in the process of being gutted. So, well, I mean,
I know. Yeah.
So maybe still kind of, keep going,
Yeah.
but yeah.
No, I get it. I get
Yeah.
it. It's sad.
It's very sad.
Our Washington State Attorney General's office is always a great place to go as well. And that's what I was going to say, is that for us, I feel like it is it's you get better results when you make the complaints at our level, at our state level here, as opposed to going up to the federal level. They don't always, get a response, or it's not very timely if something happens. But when you go to the AG's office, and some people ask us too, we will make those complaints with our clients, if there is a problem, and it, we, don't really have any hesitation about that. It's okay to do. So I don't know. Sometimes I feel like there's a little bit, people are like, I don't know, if I should get involved in this. And it's not really, it's just helping the client if they are nervous about it or don't know what to say or whatever, kind of supporting them through that. So anyway, yeah, the Washington Attorney General's office, we have the Collection Agency Review Board, which is part of our Department of Licensing, which I learned that from Julia, actually. And I did not know that. And then, of course, looking for, any kind of legal assistance, and that might be through Northwest Justice as well.
And about the complaints to what we call the CFPB, it's more just that they have a historically drilled down and done really great individual follow-up. They may not have the capacity. So the Federal Trade Commission is a great place complaining to both the FTC and the CFPB. Great. I just wouldn't expect the one-to-one right now. And after this past week, I think, in terms of the staffing of those of the CFPB, but the AG, our state attorney general's office, the collection agency review board governs and handles complaints about collection agencies. So we have really good state level regulators to complain about how someone is treating debt collection. But sure, definitely, go ahead and complain also at the federal level. Depending on staffing levels, you may not hear back.
It's true. And one of the nice things, and again, I know we're talking about the CFPB here, but they do have a great feature on their website. Like you can look up companies and see like how many complaints they have about them and that kind of thing. So it can be really helpful and really
Yeah,
eye-opening.
yeah.
All right. Uh, I think we're just kind of at the summing up here. What are we looking at? Just again, kind of goes back to we've been saying all along, right? Understanding our finances. What are our priorities when it comes to paying bills, or what are the priorities to the client when it comes to paying bills? Um, as it says on the screen, don't let an aggressive debt collector persuade you to reprioritize your debts. That's really, really critical. And it does happen. And it's unfortunate. What are different options for repaying debts? Or is it a settlement? Is it a do-it-yourself kind of settlement, saving up money to put that money aside and then come back to the collection agency to offer a settlement? Understanding what your rights are, looking at those rights, a great spot again to find those, washingtonlawhelp.org, to find information about what you can do and who to contact if something does go wrong, which we have a whole plethora of resources listed out here too. So I know the whole PowerPoint's going out to people. Is that right? Yeah, okay, perfect.
Yep. And there's a link in the chat as well. We can put it in the chat again for folks to access it, but it'll also be in the follow-up email.
Perfect. Awesome. Yeah, because there's this page of resources, and then we also have another additional page of just resources. So lots, lots of
Yeah.
resources.
And those websites are just full of great information,
Yeah.
particularly American Financial Solutions.
Oh, thank you.
And one other one I forgot to throw in here was it's a federal website,
Oh,
annualcreditreport.com is
yeah.
where I send a lot of folks to pull their credit report for free. I believe since COVID, you can still do it weekly, right? Are you limited to 3 in a 12-month period?
No,
But
weekly. Yeah.
it's a website supported by the federal government. It's terrific. It puts you through some personal data questions to make sure the person accessing it is the person whose credit report is being accessed. But it's a great way to verify, particularly if you get one of those scammy calls that Becky talked about, or somebody overly aggressive, or and particularly seniors. One way to check if this is legit is to check the credit report regularly and see what's on there. Dispute what's inaccurate, but you don't want to be giving personal information or paying a stranger over the phone just because they have some data points to make it sound like they're legit when they're not.
All right.
All
Do you
right.
have anything else or?
Oh, can I tout another really
Yes.
wonderful resource with American Financial Solutions is the free credit report review. Um, it's just a wonderful resource. I refer clients there all the time. It's a service they do. They can over the phone help folks review the credit report, which can really complicated. And I know Becky gave a wonderful training last month. But it's tricky stuff, and knowing what's on there and the importance of it, I send folks to the pros at American Financial Solutions all the time for that free credit report review.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that's great.
All
All
right.
right, you guys. I don't know if you guys have any other questions or questions we might have missed. I'm not sure.
I think we got all the
Let
questions in the
me stop.
chat. We have about
There.
4 minutes left, so maybe time for one question if someone has one question in the chat. And if while we wait for that question, potentially a couple of announcements. We would love to hear what you thought about today, hear your feedback. And so there is a link in the chat for an after workshop survey. So that is there. Put it in the chat again, just so we don't miss it. So let us know. And that also asks what else you want to learn about and what you want to see happen. So please fill that out. Let us know what you think. And it's not looking like we have any questions. So we have some if Julia and Becky, you want to drop your emails or your websites in the chat so folks know. I know it's in the PowerPoint. We've talked about it a few times, but you can feel free to access all of that and all the really great resources that were shared here today. If people can give me a clapping emoji on your Zoom or a thank you in the chat to show our gratitude to Becky and Julia. Thank you so much for being here. And then also one last announcement. While we were on this workshop, I received word that we were giving a 50% off discount to folks for our Elevate the Impact training series that I mentioned at the beginning. That's the financial coaching for prosperity financial coaching for prosperity and engage and inspire speaker boot camp and magnetic money talks. And so Jennifer just put the code in the chat for you to use if you want to sign up for those. Please join us at those, and you see the code in the chat. So with that, we will say goodbye for now. We hope to see you next month at our student loan repayment workshop. And thank you all so much for being here, and we'll see you next month.